How are we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to talk for a couple of minutes about a question that got asked on stream, and it started, the cogs ticking, and I thought there could be some useful advice for you guys on this. It was a very simple question. It was simply, I only have a small amount of gold, what should I be crafting at the moment? And a few of us started to think, well, if you've only got a small amount of gold, should you maybe still be farming? And this, it got one thing led to another when we went down a rabbit hole, and so I decided to put this little thing together for you. And it's a question that I think is more common than people realise, but the ultimate question of should I be farming or crafting is quite a big one. And so in this little video I want to basically try and cover some of the common questions. So if my goal is to make more gold, then should I be farming or should I be crafting, as a sort of a headline sort of question. At what point can I make more gold by crafting than I can by doing some simple farming? And to the question that sparked all of this off, I only have a limited amount of gold, what should I craft? Now, before we dive too deep into this, one thing is to be very clearly stated, is that if you're having fun doing either or, if you're having fun farming or if you're having fun crafting, that should be the be-all and end-all for the most part. Don't actively engage in something in-game that you don't enjoy. You may have noticed, if you've watched this channel for any given amount of time, I'm not the biggest fan of farming, but that's not to say I don't understand it has a really solid place in gold making. It is something that everybody has to go through at some point, because it is, without a doubt, the simplest, the easiest, the most risk-free method of making a quite often sizable amount of gold. Now, of course, farming is also a very broad term in itself. You could be farming materials, you could be running around collecting transmogs, you could be farming pets, you could even be farming mounts. There's plenty of different things you could be farming, but we're going to look at a couple of examples here to try and figure out some of these questions. That is it going to be better for me to use my time based on the resources that I have, going out doing some farming, or can I put these resources that I have, namely gold, to good use and start doing some crafting? So the original question, I only have a limited amount of gold, what should I be crafting, was somebody that was entering the legendary market, right? They didn't have enough gold to level up all of the legendaries. They wanted to know which ones were the better ones to level up so that they can focus on those and utilize their crafting to make a little bit of gold that way. But with that in mind, let's start looking at example number one here. The farming side of things is pretty easy. We just pick ourselves a common farming route or a material to go out there and farm. We do it on a druid because doing it on a druid is optimal for its speed, and of course, for most people, it's very little effort to actually sell those materials. You can take your stack of materials after your hours farming, put them on the auction house, and within reasonable certainty, maybe one or two relists, sure, you'll have sold your materials and you'll be, let's say for the purpose of this video, 25,000 gold richer. Now, I know at some points at the start of the expansion pack, people were doing silly things. They were doing 100,000 gold an hour farming heavy callous hide, and towards the end of patch 9.0.5, people were struggling to make more than 10,000 gold. So one thing to know with farming is it is like everything, it's a bit seasonal. We've picked a middle of the run, an average now. If you can get 25,000 gold an hour farming, how much do I have to do in terms of crafting to outperform that? So let's look at this first little example. Say you've got 100,000 gold available to you. You buy up a bunch of materials for whichever profession it is you're looking to focus on. You spend half an hour buying materials, crafting those items, and then with a little bit of auction house PvP, you can go out and you can sell the majority of those items. Let's say it takes you an hour and a half with some relatively aggressive cancel scanning on the auction house to sell through most of your stuff. Now, one thing you've got to bear in mind is that if you're being selective with what you're crafting, the likelihood is you're going to want to go for the stuff that's popular. You're going to want to be crafting the things that you're going to be able to sell quickly. In the original example of the legendaries, they wanted to know which of their leatherworking stuff should they be crafting, and so they focused on one to craft just that. Now, what it turned out to be was that one that they'd focused on was a very competitive item, and it meant that the margins, the profit they were able to make by selling it was much smaller than some of the others, but in theory it's a faster selling item, it should move a little bit quicker. They were happy with that. They were getting somewhere in the region of about 15% profit on top of all of the cost of actually crafting the item in the first place. So after their time doing some crafting, they've ended up with 115,000 gold in sales. Obviously, you've got to take away the material cost from that, so they take away the 100,000 gold that it cost them to make those items in the first place, and it means they're 15,000 gold up. They've made 15,000 gold more than what they had before, but it took them about 2 hours to do this in total. They had to buy the materials, they had to craft the items with it, they had to spend the time in the auction house listing. Now, of course, the way the auction house works is you don't necessarily have to do this in one go. You could, in theory, just spend 5 minutes posting those items on the auction house and then disappear for 24 hours. Come back and keep your fingers crossed and hope they've sold. But we're going to go by the basis that you're doing some auction house PvP, as I like to call it, spending some time on the auction house doing some cancel scanning and promoting, making sure that your items are the cheapest available, so when that buyer comes, the chance of them buying yours is at its greatest. But there's a big glaring obvious issue with this, right? They actually only made somewhere in the region of about 7,500 gold an hour. It took them 2 hours to be 15,000 gold richer than what they started with. They had to spend 100,000 gold in the first place on the materials, which to them was a sizable risk because they haven't got unlimited amount of gold. In this scenario, it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Farming is going to be the way forward for this person. So if you're starting off small, sure, go ahead, but don't expect massive results from crafting if you're going in at a small level, if you're only spending a little bit on materials, only selling a few items. Let's look at example 2 though. Let's see if there's some stuff we can do to incentivize better results. So for example 2, we're going to use the exact same situation for the farmer. We're going to say, right, well, we're going to do the same thing on the same character with the same variables. We're still going to make ourselves 25,000 gold an hour through the farming. But this time, we've found ourselves a crafter that's willing to take a bit more of a risk, spend a little bit more gold. So they're willing to invest up to 400,000 gold of their hard-earned, and they're going to go away, they're going to craft some stuff. Now, obviously, if you're crafting a lot more things, it's going to take you longer. It takes you, let's say, an hour to do a whole bunch of crafting, a much wider variety of things now. Instead of just laser focusing on one crafted item or 1 or 2 items, you can spread your wings a little bit further, craft a whole bunch of things, and this is going to do one major thing for you. This is going to, on average, increase the profit that you make on stuff. Sure, you're going to have those fast moving, low margin items that are sort of guaranteed sales, sure, but they don't make you a lot. But on the flip side, you'll get a couple of good sales that will be really high in profit, and it all balances out. If you can take a broader approach to your crafting, you can very easily improve the amount of profit that you make overall. But of course, you've made a lot more stuff, it's going to take you a lot longer to sell it. So we're going to go by the assumption now that instead of just an hour and a half to sell all your wares, you're going to have to put a little bit more effort into the auction house, and so we'll call it 3 hours for the purpose of the example. So with that 25k profit, 25% profit that you're making on stuff, you make yourself 500,000 gold worth of sales in a few hours. Take away obviously the cost that you had to spend in the first place of 400k on the materials. You've made yourself 100,000 gold in about 4 hours. Now we're at an interesting point, right? This is where crafting starts to take over. You've got to go pretty aggressive with your crafting before it becomes more valuable to you than just doing a very simple farming method. And this is something that this balance point is going to be different for different people. Now, let's go right back to the beginning where I mentioned that I really despise farming. I don't enjoy it. It's very monotonous for me. I actually, in a weird way, would probably still be happy crafting at this low level. I'd happily take 7,500 gold an hour because I, in a weird way, actually kind of quite enjoy crafting items, gathering the materials, selling the items on the auction house. I kind of enjoy that side of things. I don't mind the auction house PvP so much. I don't like farming. So even in this scenario, I would probably still pick crafting, but a sensible person would go out there and farm. Now let's look at an example where you've got a sizable amount of gold already, and you can really throw a lot of gold at crafting. You can use the gold you've already made, craft a whole bunch of things, maybe across multiple professions this time. You can do one big crafting session and then a couple of big auction house selling sessions, and let's see what you can achieve. So example 3, farming stays the same, but crafting wise this time we're willing to go out there and we're willing to spend 1 million of our gold on buying materials to craft things up. It's going to obviously take us a little bit longer to craft, and of course it's going to take us that little bit longer to then actually go out and sell those items. And of course when you're doing things at this sort of scale, you can also expect a rough 25% profit overall, generally speaking. So we're able to then do 1.25 million gold in sales in just a few hours, obviously take away our materials, and we made ourselves 250k in a few hours of effort, which when you break it down, all of a sudden is 50k gold per hour. You're making over twice as much gold per hour as you could do farming, and this is the situation you see a lot of content creators in right now. Just to name a few, you've got myself, Hickons, Dirty Irby, the Lazy Goldmaker. These are examples of relatively public gold makers out there that are in this sort of ballpark. We're playing around with lots and lots of crafted items, and for most of us this is only one avenue of gold making for us. A lot of us at the same time will also be flipping materials or flipping rare expensive items. Raid BOEs for example is a good one, but crafting is just one element of it. You will tend to find the richest players in World of Warcraft do very, very little farming, and it's for this very reason. There's a kind of a glass ceiling, there's a limit to how much gold you can make with farming without just spending more time doing it. If you scale up your crafting operation, you can, if you do it at a sizable enough point, you can actually far exceed what is available through some simple farming. So let's look at the results then. Ultimately, farming is very risk-free. You can either spend 20 minutes a day doing some farming, you could spend 5 hours a day doing some farming. The results are going to be relatively similar, but it's easy, right? You just jump on your druid, you fly around, you pick up some stuff and you dump it on the auction house. There's very little risk involved, and as we've seen, for the most part it can still be very, very rewarding. What we've also found though is crafting at scale can far outperform farming, but you do have to do it at quite a scale. If you have to ask yourself that, well, I only have enough gold to maybe craft some of these items, my suggestion to you would probably keep on at it with the farming. You'll probably spend another few hours doing some farming, then you'll have enough gold to not have to be so laser targeted with what you craft. You'll then be able to craft a wider range of things. You'll be able to craft in bigger restocking sessions. This is something that's not talked about very often, but Lazy Goldmaker especially talks about this a lot, that if you craft in bigger quantities, you actually save yourself an awful lot of time. The time spent crafting is often getting all of the materials together. Pressing the button and the 2-second craft time is neither here nor there. You can easily spend 1 million gold in roughly the same amount of time as you can spend 100,000 gold when it comes to actually crafting. So bigger scale always wins through. And one thing that should be very clear from this is that if you actually go out there and farm materials, your best option is just to sell them. Very frequently people think, well, if I farm the materials, I could sell them, but I could also craft things and then sell those crafted things. But as we know, the art of crafting items and selling those items it takes time to do it as well. That the time spent crafting and selling those items is probably going to be very, very small time crafting setups, which by themselves are very, very inefficient. If you are farming materials, the best bet is to put them on the auction house and then go farm some more. Crafting with your farmed materials is maybe not the most sensible option, although there are arguments, of course, to say otherwise, but it's just my opinion. So some final suggestions for you boys and girls. Firstly, make sure you're having fun doing it. There's no point... we are playing a game, let's not forget. We're playing a game and it should be fun. If you prefer farming, do farming. If you prefer crafting, do crafting. Forget about the numbers. But But if you're interested in trying to be somewhat optimal and trying to make as much gold as possible, I hope this has helped you out. My second little bit of advice and my final suggestion is learn Trade Skill Master. A lot of goal makers and content creators will tell you this, and a lot of us have ways and means to aid you with this. Learning Trade Skill Master will mean that you can do this auction house PvP, and you can do these cancel scans, and you can optimize your crafting, and you can let Trade Skill Master take a lot of the hard work, the heavy lifting of crafting off your shoulders, and can make the whole process much easier. I would recommend getting yourself on board with a good Trade Skill Master profile from one of the public gold makers out there. Of course, I have my own. You can collect it from patreon.com/Manthieus. My silver goblins get access to my full TSM setup and operations, so they can get up and running, but there's plenty of other goal makers out there that will offer something similar, so you take your pick. I'm obviously slightly biased, but of course. But there we go, boys and girls. I'll leave it there for now. I hope that's sort of helped clarify, or at least give you something to think about in regards to whether you should be farming or crafting based on how you enjoy to play the game. Let me know in the comments down below if you prefer farming or crafting, and if you have any trade secrets, feel free to let others know. This is a nice open community. But remember to give the video a like, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.